Welcome, everyone, to the Friday, August 22nd, 2025 episode of On Iowa Politics. This week on the podcast, we'll talk about candidates getting in, candidates getting out, a special election, last weekend's story about how some Iowa Democrats are taking a new approach to campaigning this year, and the tease ahead to another big story coming in this weekend's paper. So much to podcast, so little time. Hey, everyone, I'm Erin Murphy, the Des Moines Bureau Chief for the Gazette in Cedar Rapids, and forgive me if you're watching on YouTube and you notice my eyes darting around. I may or may not be keeping an eye on the Brewers-Cubs score as we record the podcast here this afternoon. With me this week, our Gazette Deputy Bureau Chief and noted Cubs fan, tough as that is for me to take, Tom Barton. How's it
Fly
going,
the W, Aaron. Go Cubs, go.
I'm doing everything I can to make sure that doesn't happen this afternoon. Lead Des Moines Bureau Chief Maya Marchel Hoff is with us. Hello, Maya.
Erin, I was going to give you an opening to talk about the Brewers and their amazing winning streak, but you jumped the gun on that. So go Brew Crew.
You know what
a
they
streak
say
that's
about
been interrupted by the Cubs.
Yeah. Who was so rude enough to do that?
Yeah, well, what city hands out free burgers?
That's true. That's true. I missed that. I wasn't there in 2018 either when that happened. That would have been cool. Jared McNett of the Sioux City Journal is with us. Hello, Jared.
All-time favorite brewer, Aaron. Let's hear it.
Oh, it's Robin Yount, and it's not even close. I'm a 80s, 90s kid, so that's a no-brainer. I loved the aughts teams with Prince Fielder and Ricky Weeks and Ben Sheets and all them. CC Sabathia's amazing run, but my formative years were created by Robin Yount. Got his autograph on a baseball. Gazette columnist Althea Cole is here. Hello, Althea.
Hello, Erin. Baseball is boring. I am looking forward to football season. Cyclones take on Kansas State in Dublin, Ireland tomorrow. Go Cyclones.
Yeah, that's right. They're over in the good land. I know a lot of people in Iowa are over there. We may have people tuning into the podcast from the Emerald, even possibly. Wouldn't that be nice?
My parents don't do podcasts. My parents are there, though.
All right, and Gazette columnist and Twins fan Todd Dorman. How are the Twins doing this summer, Todd?
The first day of the NFL season, September 4th. And also, as far as the Cyclones are concerned, I've heard rumors that the Trump administration may not let them back into the country. So we'll have to see how that all works out.
Just them. Kansas State's okay, but Iowa State's not.
Nah, Kansas. Yeah, all of them. Just the whole.
Oh, okay. The whole
Farmageddon.
Yeah, Governor Kim Reynolds is a huge Cyclone fan, as is Congresswoman Ashley Hinson, especially her husband. They'll get back into the country somehow, I promise.
They got pull. Yeah, Governor Reynolds is there with them as a guest of Iowa State University, actually, for the trip. All right. Let's start this by covering this busy week that was in 2026 candidate announcements. And it actually started with one of the fields getting lighter when on Monday, Democrat J.D. Scholten announced that he is withdrawing from the U.S. Senate campaign and endorsing Josh Turek, his fellow Western Iowa State lawmaker, who himself just entered the race a week prior. Jared, we were joking at the end of last week's podcast that there were only two Western Iowa Democratic office holders, and they were both in the Senate primary. Well, not anymore. I heard from some people that said they were a little surprised that J.D. Scholten dropped out of the campaign this early. Were you as well?
Yeah, the timing of that conversation, real good, good work on our part. And also, this was yet another story that came out on a Monday, which, as I've complained about before, is a day that I do not work. Right. So it seems like every single important candidate announcement has happened on Mondays. So that's perfect timing. No, anytime a candidate drops out so far ahead of even the primary is surprising on some level, no matter what other factors might be at play. Because, if it's a money thing, there's enough time left. You could still get some more money or gain some more momentum. So I was definitely surprised by that. And then the other thing I was sort of thinking about is, like you said, he dropped out to endorse Turek. But I almost wonder if the person who's going to benefit benefit from this the most is going to be Nathan Sage, since I think him and Schulten are maybe a little bit closer in terms of the way they've kind of framed themselves as like the populist sorts of candidates in the race. So that was immediately kind of what my thoughts were when I saw that story coming out.
Yeah. Hey, speaking of that, Maya, was it you and I that were joking about what's the difference between regular populism and prairie populism? Jared, do you know the answer to that?
More swearing, maybe some more beer. You know, a few more Lutherans, you know, since we're in the prairie.
All right. Fair enough. All right, we're going to keep zipping through here. Moving on, Lindsey James made it a net zero Democratic candidates week when she announced her campaign for Congress in Eastern Iowa's 2nd congressional district, where the one where Republican Ashley Hinson is the incumbent. So J.D. Schulten out in one race, Lindsey James in another. We've known for months that James was at least thinking about this, and this week she pulled the trigger. Tom, what does her entry into that particular Democratic primary mean? There's two other candidates in that one, correct?
Well, actually, 3.
Okay.
So you have Kathy Dolter, a retired dean of nursing at Kirkwood Community College, and then you have Clint Tweet Ball, former longtime Cedar Rapids nonprofit leader who helped with flood recovery efforts in Cedar Rapids after the 2008 flood. And then you also have a Democrat in Hardin County, former state park manager at Pine Lake State Park, Don Primus. He's filed paperwork with the FEC, a statement of organization, to run as a Democrat in that race, but, you know, doesn't really have a campaign presence. Gotcha. Didn't have any kind of official launch or announcement. The other question you asked me.
Just what does Lindsey James' entry into this race mean for the primary?
Yeah. So I guess the biggest thing is name ID, name recognition. Mm-hmm. Being a Democrat who has served in the Iowa House, she's currently serving in her 4th term, won re-election in 2024 by 12 percentage points. In 2023, she was named House Minority Whip, making her the number 2 Democrat in the Iowa House. She served in that role, I believe, up until this year. Decided to step down from that. But the biggest thing is that the other 3 candidates in this race are largely first-time candidates, right? Either they have never run for elected office before, or they have never launched a congressional campaign before. I think the guy from Hardin County, Don Primus, I think he did run for Hardin County supervisor. But anyway, Kathy Dolter, Clint Tweetball, these are first-time candidates. Lindsey James, while she's an Iowa a state representative representing Dubuque, she's known within Iowa Democratic circles. She's got name recognition in the district. She's run a campaign before. She has a legislative record serving in the Iowa House. That's kind of a double-edged sword. One, she can say, look, while I've been in the Iowa House, I've been able to fight for X, Y, and Z. Her work in the legislature includes efforts to reduce the cost of insulin and championed affordable housing initiatives, particularly for residents of manufactured housing communities. On the flip side of that, it also means there's a record there that Ashley Hinson and her campaign can attack, which they have. They've criticized Lindsey James for not supporting state income tax cuts and for supporting physicians' rights to prescribe gender-affirming care to minors. There's some other things in there that they've also attacked. Her opposition to education savings accounts, taxpayer-funded savings accounts that families can use in Iowa to pay for private school costs. But the biggest thing is that she's able to bring in a she's able to stand up a grassroots campaign organization. She's been able to compile pretty quickly a campaign team, has been able to fundraise. I think her campaign just in the last couple hours announced that they raised about $150,000 just within the first 48 hours of announcing her campaign. So, her entry into the race brings a established Democrat who is able to, again, organize, fundraise, has already got established support in the district that she can build off of. As I mentioned, there's some early momentum for her campaign that potentially she can build on, as opposed to again, these other candidates who, aren't well known in the district. I mean, Clint Tweet Ball, well known in the Cedar Rapids area, maybe not well known in the rest of the district. And so, may have a bit of a tougher time, getting his name out, getting his message out, introducing himself to voters. Lindsey James, again, kind of already established in the district. And so doesn't have to spend as much time introducing herself to voters, right? It can focus more on kind of her message, her campaign, why she's running, why she feels that she is a better person to represent the district, and, make the case for why there needs to be a change in direction, and why Ashley Hinson should go.
All right. And the third and final candidate update this week, we can now field the basketball team in the Republican primary for governor, as on Tuesday evening, state agency head Adam Steen announced his campaign. He is now the fifth Republican running for, or basically campaigning while thinking about running for governor. Until announcing his candidacy, Steen had been serving as director of the Iowa Department of Administrative Services, which, if you're not familiar with that state agency, it's essentially state government's HR department. Maya, you covered Steen's campaign launch for us. What did he have to say, and where in particular? Tell us where he held this campaign launch event.
Yeah, so a day after one of the candidates dropped out of the race and, a candidate joined, we have another candidate joining the already pretty full Republican field for Iowa governor. As you said, Steen is the former DAS director. At his launch event, which I'll get to in a second, he mentioned that he had resigned from his position as director that morning at 10 a.m., where he walked in and handed in his resignation papers. But yeah, his event was held at the Berean Assembly of God Church in Pleasant Hill, Iowa, just a suburb of Des Moines. And it was, I think, one of the first, the first campaign announcements I've ever been to in a church. It was kind of a smaller than you'd imagine, like a mega church, but kind of, like there was a stage, there was a big screen, a lot of seating, surround sound, and then the evening kicked off, not with any political announcements or anything, but by a performance by the church band A17 Worship. They performed two songs, and it seemed as though most of the audience was the church congregation. A lot of people were singing along, raising their hands, and then the pastor came out and announced Steen, and he came out with his family and started giving his speech and launched his campaign formally. In his speech, I think he already kind of made it obvious by holding his event at his church, but he really closely intertwined his faith and his, spiritual beliefs with his campaign and his platform, and kind of pointed to it as the reason why he decided to jump into the race. He praised Governor Reynolds for her legacy and said he would like to continue to kind of carry that torch forward. If he wins. In his speech, he made it clear. He said, "I'm the faith guy, I'm the Jesus guy, I'm the Make America Great guy." It just kind of made that pretty clear. As you mentioned, he is the former DAS director, and one of the things that he really highlighted was last December, he rejected the Satanic Temple of Iowa's request to hold a celebration and set up a display in the Iowa State Capitol Rotunda. He said like back then, his argument was the temple's display violated the obscenity guidelines in the memorandum of understanding that groups are required to follow when they hold these displays or events in the Capitol complex. Those guidelines prohibit obscene materials, including ones that depict gratuitous violence or gore. And then right now he's being sued. The ACLU, on behalf of the temple, is bringing a lawsuit against Steen, arguing that this cancellation violated their First Amendment rights. But he said that he's the guy that stood up in front of Satanists when they, quote, blatantly targeted children. And he also mentioned something that I don't think was ever mentioned or really reported on, but he said that he denied a request for an all-ages family-friendly drag show at the Capitol. He kind of pointed to the same reason for the Satanic temple's display, and he argued it would blatantly target children, and he was protecting them. So the whole announcement was probably like an hour, half music, half speech. Yeah.
All right. So that gubernatorial primary, as we said, keeps growing. We're up to 5 now for the time being. Like you said, there's a couple in there who said they're exploring and haven't decided for 100% sure yet. So we'll see, and obviously monitor that as the campaign rolls along. And real quick, we also, speaking of elections, we've got one. We don't have to wait until next June and November. We've got one coming up next week. There's a special election in Western Iowa for a seat in the Iowa Legislature. The open seat was created with the passing of former Republican Senator Rocky DeWitt. Jared, remind us of who the candidates are. Tell us what you've learned about them in this campaign.
So yeah, this is for Senate District 1. Like you said, it's on Tuesday. Polls open at 7 a.m. and close at 8 for everybody that's listening locally. And yeah, the Democratic candidate, Caitlin Dre, has a background in strategic comms and has been on the committee for the Woodbury County Democratic Party. The Republican candidate, Christopher Proch, is a political strategist, and he's worked on a number of campaigns in different states. And as has been the case for other states and even other special elections in Iowa, there's been plenty of interest in this race well outside of the district itself. And there's, of course, a couple reasons for that. Probably the biggest one is that were the Democratic candidate Caitlin Dre to win, that would prevent Republicans in the Senate from having a supermajority, which obviously matters when it comes to various gubernatorial nominees. So right now it's at 33-16 because of the passing of Rocky DeWitt. It would have been 33-17 before that. Yeah, my math is great. So obviously that's a big reason for the interest, but also just these special elections or just off-cycle elections the year after a presidential election, kind of wherever they are in the country, people really glom onto them as possible litmus tests as to how people are feeling about whatever party is more in power. And so that's definitely happening with this as well. And not only has there been this interest from people well outside of the district, but there's been plenty of support from outside the district. Both candidates have campaigned and canvassed with a number of people from outside the district. Christopher Proch has an event on Friday with Lieutenant Governor Chris Knoyer. He's canvassed with done an event with Senate Majority Leader Jack Whitfer. Caitlin Dre has gotten the backing of a number of different groups, including the Democratic Legislative Committee, the national group, which she was really touting and talking about how some of those national Democratic groups have really sort of ignored Iowa for the better part of the past decade. So she was very proud of the fact that they've taken a particular interest in this race. So special elections really drum up the interest.
I'm glad you mentioned it, because I was going to ask, are the candidates themselves talking about that supermajority line that we're walking now with the outcome of this one? Or is that more coming from the outside groups?
So, I mean, just going through, their Facebook posts and stuff like that, there hasn't been a lot that's like honed in on that in particular, unless I missed some of the posts. There's been so many posts from both of their Facebook campaign posts. But a lot of it has just kind of been, some back and forth on the issues and some of the stuff you might expect, like the Republicans saying that Caitlin Dre is too radical, and the Democrats kind of painting Christopher Proch as a sort of political hatchet man. So it's been more of that kind of stuff than talking about even the realities of what it would mean for the legislative makeup.
That's interesting. All right. So we'll obviously talk about the outcome of that one next week. We're going to spend a little time now on the story that appeared in the Gazette and Lee newspapers this past weekend about how Iowa voters are demanding something a little different from Iowa Democrats, and how some Democratic candidates are taking a different approach to campaigning this year. A lot of people have. Thank you to those who have. But if you haven't yet, we very much encourage you to check that out. It's all over every website that we have. If you still have your print copy of last Sunday's Gazette, that's where it appeared in print. Tom, I'll start with you. You got a little taste of this at a J.D. Schulten campaign event before he dropped out, obviously. So tell us a little about what you heard that day through the lens of what this story talked about, and not just from Schulten, but you also heard some interesting things from Iowa voters at that event.
Yeah, I did. I guess one of the biggest things that stood out to me from that J.D. Schulten event last month here in Cedar Rapids was voters feeling like Democrats haven't pushed back enough against Republicans and the narrative that Republicans are putting out there. There was one woman in the crowd who essentially said, I want you to essentially take the gloves off. I want you to fight. I don't want you to be nice to Joni Ernst, saying that, if Democrats are going to have a shot at winning back the Senate majority, we've got to put red states like Iowa in play by shrinking the margins in conservative counties. Schulten argued that key to doing that is, being genuine, showing up consistently, focusing on people's real economic concerns, making politics feel relevant, accessible, and personally meaningful rather than distant or intimidating. He said that doesn't mean that you run as Republican light, but standing firm on principles while being authentic. It means talking to people in local gathering spots like gas stations and coffee shops, connecting with bartenders, baristas, servers, and stylists or barbers who can influence their social networks, and engaging with people who are not planning to vote, not just trying to convert Republicans. In response to that, there was this 68-year-old lifelong Democrat, I think from Iowa City or Johnson County, who said that she's a self-described socialist, expressing frustration with the Democratic Party's tendency to, in her terms, favor cookie-cutter candidates over authentic ones, which she said she believes has led to voter disengagement, and said, she admires admires Democrats like Governors J.B. Pritzker in Illinois and Gavin Newsom in California for what she said, or what she views as their integrity and willingness to fight for their values. And she said that she feels that the Democratic Party is compromising too much and needs to stand firm on its values and confront issues directly and change its narrative to highlight equality and accessibility. She said, quote, Democrats need to stop apologizing for being Democrats and for being decent human beings. She says that she believes that the party has reached across the aisle so far that there's no center anymore. And I think it's time that Democrats stood up and said no. That remark drew applause and a hell yeah from the crowd. She's told Schulten, I want you to fight. I don't want you to be nice to Joni Ernst. I don't want you to be nice to Chuck Grassley. And Schulten responded by saying that Democrats need to do better by standing up to bullies.
That stuff was so, and again, go check out the story. Some really interesting stuff that Tom heard and I heard from the people we talked to on the voter side. Althea, two of the candidates who figured prominently in our story were Rob Sand, the Democratic state auditor who's running for governor, and Nathan Sage, one of the Democrats running for the U.S. Senate, as has been mentioned. Sand has been talking about his faith and his love of hunting, his distaste for the two-party system. That line's been a real big hit at the events I've covered. While Sage has taken pride in being occasionally vulgar and being described as, quote, like MAGA, but a Democrat. I'm curious, Althea, from your perspective, this new approaches that we're seeing from some Democratic candidates, is that going to work with general election voters in Iowa here? I mean, the Democrats have had a rough run of success here over the last 10 years. Is this all it takes to win back Iowa voters, or do you think they'll see it a different way next November?
Well, let's start with Rob Sand. Interestingly enough, who's as you said, he's doing a lot of talking about his faith. A real nice guy shtick. Tom, what was it that the article said about I want you to fight, not necessarily looking for the nice guy? Okay, be that as it may. Rob Sand is really trying to impress upon people that he is a Democrat with a little d. And that's not in and of itself surprising. But it is in a primary when generally the party, the candidates really tell the Democratic base, the party base, what they want to hear. And, to your point, Erin, distaste for the two-party system is something that a lot of people do want to hear, but it kind of glosses over the actual purpose of the two-party system. And more specifically, what does that mean for the general election, given that he's already taken such a moderate stance? Now, he can get away with taking a moderate stance. We know that Rob Sand is going to be the nominee for Democrats to be the next governor of the state of Iowa. I realize that there are more candidates or at least one more candidate in the primary. No disrespect to that candidate, but Sand has had this wrapped up for quite a while, and for two reasons. Number one, he's got extremely deep pockets thanks to his uber wealthy father-in-law and his wife and the in-laws. But even if you take the money issue and you set that completely aside, you've still got the fact that Rob Sand is the only statewide elected Democrat in Iowa since the 2022 election, which means that when voters cast their general election votes in November of 2026, it will be just shy of 4 years that there has been one statewide elected Democrat. And when I say statewide, I mean not only state offices, but also federal offices. Rob Sand has been the guy and the only guy. So he is going to naturally be seen as the guy who can lift the Iowa Democratic Party out of the deep, deep, deep hole they're in. He is their only chance. Go, Rob. The hole is deep, partly because of state Democrats' own digging. A lot of it has to do with national Democrats and the manner in which they've turned their back on Iowa Democrats. And to that point, what does that mean for Democrats in the general election if Rob Sand continues this shtick of being a magnanimous moderate, where he continues to reject the two-party system? That particular strategy totally ignores the fact that when you are at the top of a ticket, as he will be, starting in June of 2026, at the top of the ticket, your job is to also help the people in your party below you. And if he's going to be on the platform, on the soapbox, saying two-party system sucks, I'm a Democrat with a little d, again, what does that mean for the down ticket candidates? What does that mean for his relationship with the Democratic Party? Can he do a general election race without the support of the Democratic Party, whether it be just state Democrats or whether it be national Democrats as well? And if things don't go that well, if Rob Sand decides, I'm going to do this on my own, I'm going to, toss all the rest of you people to the side and give it my best go with all of my, father-in-law's huge campaign cash donations. Okay, but again, what does that mean for his relationship with national Democrats in the future? I predicted that would probably get in the way of whether or not he gets to give a big, exciting speech at the 2028 Democratic National Convention. Now let's go to Nathan Sage, who I believe you said, and I've got the script right here, has taken pride in being occasionally vulgar and described as like MAGA, but a Democrat. To that point, I think there are a lot of people out there who would suggest that MAGA and Democrat are entirely oxymoronic, so you cannot be the same thing at the same time. Again, that depends on your definition of MAGA. I have not seen a candidate on the Republican side who brags about being exactly like Trump or exactly like MAGA. I've never seen a candidate say, I'm your person because I'm just like Trump or I'm super MAGA, and really have an easy time of it. At least not unless they are in a super easy district, which Nathan Sage is not. He's not a district, he's a state, but he is, he would be a challenger of we assume, until we hear otherwise, that Joni Ernst will be the incumbent Republican who has won twice. So he's already got an uphill battle, but is being crass, dropping an F-bomb here and there, which, we all do that, especially journalists. Is that enough to make him comparable to how Republicans, or at least persuadable conservative voters in the state of Iowa, view MAGA? I'm telling you right now that it's not. If he wants to try that, great. I don't see how that particular shtick is going to attract enough voters. It's not going to take enough voters away from Joni Ernst, and it's not going to. He already isn't starting with enough Democrat voters being engaged. Nationwide, we're seeing that the Democrats are in a crisis when it comes to registering voters. They've been talking about that in the New York Times. They've been talking about that in national podcasts. I don't have the information in front of me right now. It's on my phone from which I am recording this podcast, but I did take a look at voter registration numbers, just the comparison between July and August, because that was the quickest thing I could find on the Secretary of State Paul Pate's Facebook page. And it looks like even now, when Republicans should be cooling off a little bit and Democrats should really be heating up, I'm not seeing that just in the month to month, in 1 month to 1 month from Democrat voter registrations. Republicans are still picking up just a little more. Democrats are still losing just a little bit less. Month to month, it's only going to be a couple hundred voter difference, but it's definitely not a path on which Democrats want to find themselves. So if Sage and Sand have plans and they're really going to, stick with these particular strategies, we'll have to see how it goes.
Yeah, that's such a good point, Althea, about because it's we can talk about winning the persuadables and whatever, but you also still and everyone in a campaign will tell you this, you still have to have your base out there for you too. So do you risk alienate any of those folks? Todd, I'm curious your perspective on this. Have Democrats cracked the code, found some kind of secret sauce here? Is it as simple as a little more folksy campaign style, or cussing a little more often, or is that oversimplifying it, and the major challenge will still lie ahead for Democrats to win a general election in the state?
Well, I think the secret, now this just stays between us. I think the secret is you got to have quality candidates to win elections. I know that's very controversial. It's very controversial, and I probably won't say it ever again, but just here today with just us. Because, I think a lot of what Schulten said is right. You have to be genuine. You have to be authentic. Voters can see a fake focused group candidate from a mile away because they've been offered so many over the years. I think Sand is a quality candidate. I think, when he talks about his faith and hunting and all of that stuff, I think he's being genuine. I mean, we've all watched him over the years, and this isn't just something he started when he ran for governor. He's been a little bit quirky and a little bit, talking about the breakfast pizzas and all that. I think he's also smart enough to understand the issues and to put together ideas that will appeal to voters and put them together in a way that they're understandable and that, people might embrace his agenda. But I mean, I think I always think back to with a candidate, picking a good candidate. I mean, Republicans Democrats, went 30 years without a Democratic governor between 1969 and 1999. And in that time, they ran a lot of mediocre candidates. I mean, we never had Governor Don't Gamble on Campbell. We never had Governor Junk Bond Junkins. We just, those candidates were not great candidates. And so they didn't win. Along comes Tom Vilsack with good political instincts, genuine, had a good story to tell, and had the message that we needed to rotate the crops, and he succeeded. Now, I'm not saying we need another Tom Vilsack. We just need Democrats need a candidate that has those instincts and basically can appeal to voters where they live. If you express your authenticity by, launching a few swears, or you talk about Jesus, or you talk about a disability that you've overcome. I mean, these are all ways that you can do that. And I think in every case they're not shined up for public perceptions. I think I think these are real reflections of who the candidates are. And I think that can only help them. But of course, the other problem is demographics. We've got a lot of non-college educated white voters who basically went from, many of them supporting Democrats to basically a lot of them supporting Trump, and they haven't come back. Figuring out how to get them back, is difficult. But I do think this sort of pox on both parties. We're tired of the political wars and the negativity and the battles and all of that. I think there is a segment of the electorate out there that's up for grabs, that is sort of bored and unhappy and tired with the way politics is conducted now. I mean, we can talk about the wisdom of thinking both parties are both bad and the same, but I mean, it's a genuine feeling out there. So I think Democrats are, most of their candidates are looking at this. They haven't. It doesn't appear they're going to nominate, insert profession here from Des Moines, which is nice. And I hope if one of them grew up in a small town but then immediately left to get the hell out of there, they probably should just not even talk about it. You don't know how many candidates we've seen that are like, hey, I grew up in a small town. I've been to farms, and I haven't been there in 30 years, but so anyway,
I think that drives home, Todd, too. Something you said, and we'll see. You said that you believe it's authentic when it comes from Rob Sand like that. We'll see ultimately how Iowa voters pick up on that. But that is one thing I feel comfortable saying, is that Iowans have a good radar for that. That they know when it's, like you said, it's cookie cutter, and they know when it's being faked. And so I think that'll be interesting to see how, as this progresses, and especially as we get beyond next June's primary and in the general election, to see how voters respond to these candidates, whomever comes out of those primaries. And as noted, I think we can safely bet who is going to be in one of them. The Senate one, maybe less so.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that Democrats like the most about Sand is he seems to sort of worry Republicans. So, I mean, that's something they're gonna like.
What was the headline of the Wall Street Journal article? It was like meet the. What was it? It
was something along the lines of like, meet the Democrat that Republicans are worried about in red state America.
Yeah.
So,
with respect to Rob Sand, we were talking about him, really wanting to come across as a moderate being an issue with, some parts of the base. But I almost wonder more, because we're talking about, moderating or, being authentic or being a fighter. And I would think more of an issue with him, possibly with parts of the base, would be that he doesn't necessarily code as a fighter to everyone. He can point to fights he's had, with the governor and everything like that. But this, in terms of disposition, I don't necessarily know that he codes that way to everyone.
No, if anything, quite the opposite. That's a good point, Jared. He kind of tries to make the argument that he's a bringer together of people, right?
Right. And we are very much in an age where people want to see their candidates fight.
Not so much an attack dog as a watchdog.
Yeah. If you look at the Republican side too, I don't know who the bruiser is in the Republican gubernatorial primary. I don't think Randy Feenstra has a reputation for being a bare-knuckled politician. So there's that.
It's obviously going to be fascinating as this thing progresses over the next year. We know very little right now, other than what we hear at the few events, and we'll learn more and more as time goes on. Speaking of which, before we sneak out, kind of like last week when we gave you a little tease to this story that we've just been talking about. This week, I want to give a little time to Maya to talk about a story she and Sarah, who couldn't make it on the podcast this afternoon, other duties called. You guys have been working on a story that I think is going to publish this weekend, right, Maya?
The first installment, yes.
There we go. We got multiple salvos coming, and it's sort of tangentially related to all this. I'll just let you take it from here. Give us just a little bit, just enough to pique our listeners' interest, so they'll want to read all about it this weekend.
Yeah, to, answer that prompt and also maybe help tie everything that we talked about today up in a somewhat neat little bow. We're just looking generally at, first of all, Iowa's political shift between 2012 and 2024. That's not a secret. That's not this big scoop or big investigative new revelation that we've had, but we really wanted to get into the why and where we're at in 2024. There's been a lot of reporting on it throughout, when the state flipped from Obama to Trump, voting for Obama in 2012 to voting for Trump in 2016, right? It was a state that Obama won in 2012, and now Trump won it by over 13 points in November. So what we really want to look at is why. Obviously, there's no silver bullet. It's a thing that political scientists and forecasters have, they're still scratching their heads about. It's a thing that both parties, more particularly, and obviously the Democratic Party, are dissecting and really trying to reflect and see why, and trying to take that information and see how they can regain footing, especially in rural areas. But we're focusing on a couple different counties, the ones that have seen the largest shifts in the 12 years, specifically in the presidential elections. And the reason why we both missed the podcast 2 weeks ago is because we were traveling to those counties and talking to voters and folks and locals and party chairs and anyone that with a pulse that was willing to talk to us. But yeah, just kind of some of the similar things that, overarching things we heard in all three counties. Should I say the counties? I don't think that's a big secret. Howard County, Chickasaw County, and Jackson County, all kind of in northeastern Iowa. The most interesting thing about this reporting trip was whenever I talk to voters, I feel like it's most commonly at political events. It's people that are very tuned into politics, that have very strong feelings about it, and are more likely to have allegiance to either party. We were walking down the street talking to folks, walking into cafes and historical buildings and just all these places talking to people. And the overarching thing is most people we talk to just are not crazy about how politics is going. They're not really crazy about a particular party. If they do lean a certain way, they're kind of holding their nose and voting for that person. Obviously, President Trump has a significant advantage in all these places, right? Like, he does have a large base in these areas, but a lot of people, even if they do vote for him, and maybe one of the reasons why a lot more people we saw that shift is because a lot of people we talked to, almost everyone, said that they feel left behind by both political parties. They feel left behind, at least before Trump came onto the scene. They felt left behind, and their issues as blue collar workers and farmers, and just in these rural communities that weren't getting enough attention. A lot of people also just expressed that conversations in the community around politics have gotten more volatile and intense. Again, that's not surprising if you've been to Thanksgiving lately, but they just said that that's really been exacerbated, especially in the last two elections. And that's just really kind of not fully changed how these communities interact, but it's definitely, changed relationships with neighbors and just these more tight-knit communities than, we see in larger cities. So if you want to hear that more and, deep dive into these individual counties, those will be coming out later. But this overarching piece is just kind of weaving together the themes that we've heard from all these folks in these counties and political scientists and the numbers we've been crunching and all that good stuff. So
Maya, I would say you couldn't have picked a better chunk of counties or better part of the state, because I thought about this plenty when I worked at the Globe Gazette in Mason City. Mitchell County, which is right next to Howard County, was in our coverage area. And every election from Dukakis up until Obama's run in 2012, Mitchell County went reliably to the Democratic Party. And then it flipped in the very next cycle. In fact, in 2012, I think in particular, it was the whitest county in the country that went for Obama. And then it flipped to Trump in 2016, and then has just safely stayed on that side of the ledger ever since then. So that is a very, if you're going to pick any part of the state to try to explain that, that's probably the best part of the state to go to.
You can say the same thing about Dubuque County. Experienced the same thing there when I was with the Telegraph Herald. Yeah, with Trump, first time that Dubuque County elected a Republican for president since Dwight D. Eisenhower.
Yeah, and I know from past reporting, and I just can't remember which one of those it is. One of those counties was the biggest swing of the Obama-Trump counties in Iowa, if not the country. I'll look this up so I can.
It may have been Howard County.
I think it was Howard. Do you know, Maya?
It was Howard County.
Yeah, there you go.
Between 2012 and 2024, it swung over 52 points. And kind of to that note,
52 points.
Yes.
Gosh.
Yes. And kind of to that point about what Tom and Jared said about Dubuque County and Mitchell County, Howard definitely was the leader. Chickasaw and Jackson had high 40s shifts, but there were a lot of other counties that also had shifts in the 40s. They were just the ones that were highest up in the 40s, right?
Yeah.
So they're not like super big outliers. Like there are tons of counties like these counties. These are just the ones that had down to the numbers, the largest shifts. But to your points, Tom and Jared, yeah, I'm sure kind of maybe the trends that we see in these counties, although they have their individual stories and makeups, could come out to be kind of similar, maybe.
Yeah, you saw a cluster of counties there along the Mississippi River, a lot of blue collar, working class river communities.
So Tipton's in Jackson County, right? Is that correct?
Tipton is in Cedar County.
Cedar County. So that was the county that in 2000 where Gore and Bush tied. It was 4,025 votes apiece.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which got them a lot of attention. But
Yeah,
I couldn't remember if it was Jackson or the other. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's a part of the state that used to be pretty purple.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fascinating. That's a good one. All right. So obviously watch for Maya's story, and then we'll have Maya and Sarah's work, and we'll have more to talk about that next week after the story runs and the series is off and running. That's going to do it for this episode of On Iowa Politics. Appreciate you sticking it out with us a little longer, but like we said, had a lot of great stuff to talk about. We didn't even talk about the wingding. We had to leave stuff on the cutting room floor this week. All right, that's going to do it for this week's episode. If you're not already, please subscribe to us on your streaming service of choice. We're on YouTube, where you should also smash that like button. You can also find the podcast each and every week on your preferred Gazette or Lee newspaper website. Now you listen to the On Iowa Politics podcast. Make sure you also subscribe to the On Iowa Politics newsletter, where every morning in your inbox you'll receive all the latest politics and government coverage from our team. You can subscribe to that free newsletter at the Gazette's website, thegazette.com. And if some morning you get one that's really good, forward it to all your friends and tell them to subscribe to it too. Lastly, don't forget that the work of everyone you heard here today can be found on the pages and websites of the Quad City Times, Muscatine Journal, Cedar Rapids Gazette, Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier, Mason City Globe Gazette, Council Bluffs Daily Nonpareil, and the Sioux City Journal. For Tom Barton, Maya Marchel, Hoff, Jared McNett, Althea Cole, Todd Dorman, and our producer Bailey Cheon, I'm Erin Murphy. Be well, everyone, and be good.